afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the New Energy Works Conversations. I'm Drake Ambrosino, part of the sales team, and we're glad you could join us today. That little ditty is from my favorite singer-songwriter, Tim O'Brien, and that song is entitled, Get Out There and Dance. I recommend you all do that. I believe in it heartily, wholeheartedly. These multiple sessions are being recorded. They're on our website for future viewing. So we have covered in the last 5 sessions, engineering, our design work, our timber shops and raisings. We've talked about some costs. So if you need a refresh on some of the points that we've discussed, you can dial back in, you can re-listen to those, or better still, give us a call. We're glad to have a conversation about your specific project. We'll be entertaining your questions and comments. There's a tab at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A. Just type in your questions and your comments and we'll be glad to address them. Today's topic, this tiny blue-green pearl. Of course, this refers to our gorgeous planet, our precious planet, and the responsibility for caring for her. We'll be talking about how we got started in the building business and in the timber frame business and enclosures, why we're so passionate about our work, and specifically about how we do our work. Joining me today, as you can see, are 2 key members, Jonathan Orpin, our president and founder of New Energy Works, Ty Allen, our head architect and manager of our construction group. So we find ourselves quickly approaching our 40th birthday in the timber frame business. We look back, almost 40 years, Jonathan. We look back at having built some great houses for great clients. We're proud of that. We all recognize the love of our craft in our timber frames, but there's more to the story, and we've become passionate about building great spaces. So I'm going to give the mic to Jonathan and let him talk about some of his insight, early visions when he started the company.
Thanks, Drake, and thanks for that playing that mandolin. I've been bugging you to do that all of these talks, and you finally pulled that out. You're such a pleasure to hang out with when you're playing that thing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, I think the question partly is, gosh, we're timber framers. What do we care about the envelope? I mean, I think that's what you're asking us, right? And in some ways, we should first define what the envelope is. It's the ability to keep the weather out, keep the warm or cold that you have in your house in. You know, it's all the stuff that, and we'll get into it a little bit more in a bit as to how we make that and why and all of that sort of stuff. But, you know, for me, I think it goes right back to the beginning. Did you really say 40 years ago? Did you need to say that? When New Energy Works started. I mean, we started as an energy-related company during, believe it or not, that first OPEC crisis. You know, we're looking at early 80s when it seemed like, you know, the real focus as a people we needed to pay attention to was energy efficiency. And it was a big deal back then. And New Energy Works began as a company that was interested in insulation and interested in solar energy. I hate to say that I'm in a rut, but 40 years later, I'm still interested in insulation and I'm interested in solar energy. And what added to that over the time was craft. Because I really also realized that, you know, the creation of shelter was of many, many things. I mean, it's complex as heck. Well, one of the things it is it becomes about pride of space and shelter and structure. And when we build these homes, we're pretty sure that, as I like to say, nobody's going to tear one of our homes down to make room for a Walmart parking lot, you know, because there's so much craft and so much energy and so much care involved in them. And the folks that we build for appreciate that. I mean, I think that that's really been cool, and that's been an inspiration all these years. So part of what we do is craft. The other part of what we do is creating extraordinary shelters and envelopes. And we do that because we just feel strongly that, you know, we've only got this one planet, this tiny blue-green pearl, and we really believe that a super high-performing house, one that doesn't use much energy to operate it over its lifespan, one is really a big part of what we're about. So New Energy Works started years and years ago as a solar and energy efficiency company and evolved into a timber frame company that it is today, but it never lost its roots. In the 80s, I used to say, God, did I really say in the 80s? In the 80s and 90s, I used to say to clients, well, you're getting the most energy efficient home you can possibly get, whether you want it or not, because people would come to us for our craft and the work we were doing, and we would build these super energy efficient structures. Now, people are interested in it once again, and really interested in it. And so it's so exciting that everybody's back in this chord. There was a time I think that it wasn't as important, but right now people are focused on it. And I'm so proud to be part of that. So I don't know, did I answer that question at all? Why we do what we do? It's been a long time.
Well, and when you started the timber frame portion of the company, enclosures were a secondary piece, or were you doing them at the same time?
No, actually, I came from it. I came to timber framing from the enclosure part. So for us, really from the beginning, enclosure, custom design, personalness, it's all been one. And we really haven't changed that much since the beginning. We've just, to be honest with you, gotten better.
Yeah, and Jonathan, you mentioned the roots. The roots haven't gone away. I think they've gotten deeper. In some ways, not taking away from anything from the past or the old days, but I think in my time at New Energy Works, I've had a firsthand opportunity to really delve into enclosure systems and think about how these systems work and the details, and all of us have. We've got people on staff now that are Passive House certified, so that means they understand detailing of high performance. All of these things we continue to try to understand and develop our own systems and really decide and determine what matters and how do we do what we do better, and continue to try to progress in that way. So roots keep getting deeper, I think.
It used to be that we would say we're just energy efficiency geeks. Well, now they've given us this title of building scientists, and we're just still geeks, and I'm okay with that. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the benefits to homeowners for these good enclosure systems. What do they mean to us each day?
I like the way you worded that, because in spite of the fact that it's also beneficial to the planet and everybody else, there really are some real benefits to the people who are paying the bill and people who are moving into these homes. I'm sure Ty can go into it as easily as I can. We talk about comfort. We talk about lower operating costs. We talk about quiet. I live on a reasonably busy street. I can't hear anybody. We talk about a lot of the things that make a good home.
Mm-hmm. And I would add to that durability. I think that durability is a kind of a buzzword that has come to the forefront the last few years. And what does durability really mean? It means just what we think it means. What's durable? In the case of a house that deals with water, bulk water really well, a house that deals with water vapor very well, a house that deals with all of the internal ambient conditions well, or the external conditions. That's what makes a really great house, and that's in some ways what matters to us. If we can design a home that's durable, not only beautiful, but durable, in particular as it comes to water management, and the enclosure has so much to do with that, then we've designed a home that not only will stand the test of time, but it does the things that Jonathan mentions. They're comfortable to be in. They hopefully require less maintenance, and those are important things too.
So what are the products that that go into our enclosures that make them as special as they are?
A lot of wood.
A lot of wood. We're wood guys. What can
Yeah.
I tell you? There's really two methods we use for the main methods of enclosing or wrapping the building. And on that note, one of the things I like to say is when we build our timber frames, it's like building a piece of furniture. We all know that. All timber framers feel that way. There are some great timber framers in the world. We build great furniture to live in. Well, and then what we do is we take a blanket, throw it over that piece of furniture, just like you'd throw it over a chair or something, and that structure, that timber frame is all nice, cozy inside of that blanket. So how do we blanket that piece of furniture, that timber frame? And I think that for us, we break it down into two different methods. One is structural insulated panels. You know, that I think is really an extraordinary invention that kind of coincided with the resurgence of timber framing in the late 70s, early 80s. And in our own situation, we have a modified wall panel system that we call our matrix wall. We've been doing that since 1993. I think I wrote an article for Timber Framers Guild Journal or something on our matrix wall system. and that's just a modified wall system. And I'll let Ty go into each of those two different systems.
Yeah, so the matrix wall really in many ways is a stud framed wall, 2x6s, 2x8s, whatever you'd like, with sheathing on the outside of that. That's the structural layer. And then what's important about it in many ways is the continuous layer of insulation on the outside of that, which is very much like a SIP panel in that you get a continuous, as Jonathan described, blanket of insulation with no thermal bridging from the inside to the outside, meaning it's cold outside, if it's all wood and then studs and then drywall, you get cold transfer across that plane. So in the case where we can put continuous insulation on the outside of a structure, in this case, we really like a product called Styco, which is a wood fiber insulation. We like it because it's made out of wood, and we're wood people, and it's good in terms of its carbon sequestration and other things, other attributes. But we really like that material as that buffer from inside to outside. And then we wrap the house with some high performance membranes to keep out bulk water and manage moisture. So that's kind of our wall system that we use. Oh, and then we fill the cavities, or the cavities are filled on site, typically with cellulose insulation. Well, cellulose is ground up newspaper, deals with water really well, and it's a great insulation. And then a SIP panel is different.
Before you go in any further,
yeah, go for it.
Just to be clear then, and if we were really organized and really smart, we'd have this diagram pop up on the screen as to what this is all about. And it is pretty cool. We've thought a lot about it. We're on matrix wall 3.2 or something like that. Over the years, it's evolved and gotten better. It still uses the cellulose because we think cellulose works with moisture well, it breathes well, but it also is a very low carbon equivalent footprint item. It's recycled newspaper. And so it's got a borate in it to help, not to help, but to control any vermin or fire issues. But it's a very natural product. It doesn't take a lot of resources to create. It uses recycled newspaper and cardboard. And so it's just a great product. We've used that since the beginning. Big change is the fact that we're now using a wood fiber, rigid wood fiber insulation. It's a European invention. We import it from Europe in containers over the water. So it's, the transportation costs aren't very much. And it has taken the place of rigid petroleum-based insulation like polyisocyanurate or expanded polystyrene. And we're finding that to be a really easy product to work with, reasonably easy product to work with, but more importantly, an ecologically sound product to work with. And so we're able to put that on the outside of the studs, on the outside of that panel that you talked about, the sheathing, which adds your rigidity and your anti-lateral movements, your shear, in other words. And then after that, we put strapping on top of that so that the siding can dry from both sides. And generally speaking, this is a breathable wall system. And it's a wall system that we use partly because the studs are open to mechanical and other issues when you build the house. So you can run your electricity, you can run your low voltage wiring. If you really needed to, you could run your plumbing, though we always like to keep plumbing inside the envelope and not part of the envelope. But it's just a reasonably easy product to work with our clients who aren't as used to working with the structural insulated panels. So it's evolved, and it's one that we've spent a lot of time developing, and our clients tend to like that. So I just wanted to spend a little more time on that matrix wall tie.
And it does sort of we've kind of said it in a few different ways maybe. It's sort of a double whammy or a triple whammy in a good way. Not only is the wall makeup predominantly wood, so you're using a material that it sequesters carbon, but also we try to find materials that have low embodied carbon, meaning it doesn't take a lot of carbon to produce them. So not only are you doing something good in terms of the material type relative to carbon, but the wall itself performs really well from a thermal perspective. So it's a good double-edged sword or something like that. You're doing multiple things with this wall system from an environmental perspective and from a
and just so for the folks who aren't quite sure what you mean when you're talking when you're discussing sequestering carbon, you know, it's what everyone knows these days is, gosh, there seems to be a lot of carbon in the atmosphere. It's creating, you know, some of the issues with ozone depletion and other issues and overheating and climate change. So by sequestering carbon, we're not releasing that carbon into the air. And so that's what you're referring to, Ty. And as part of the solution, not just doing better, but doing good, we are actually keeping carbon out of the air. And that's a wood thing in general, and why we like this matrix wall and the materials we're using.
Our matrix wall panels come in large sections. So there's also an advantage to quicker construction, quicker enclosure of your building, whether it's around the frame or it's other parts of the house. That's a huge advantage. And it's also a cost advantage when we're on site and building.
Yeah, I mean, really, we can install all the walls in a day or two on your normal house, whatever normal means, but I should have said average house, because they're all built, they're all numbered, they all fit together just like a Jenga puzzle, and they all go together. That's the same with SIPs, though. You know, SIPs also go up pretty quickly. So the idea of off-site construction, bringing the stuff to the site, putting it together very quickly, that's been a really keynote with timber framing and enclosures and SIPs since really very much at the beginning. And so, yes, you know, we're not building stud walls one stud at a time in the rain on top of a ladder. We're doing that off-site, bringing it to the site in large sections and installing it with either a all-terrain forklift or a crane.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And for those who don't understand SIPs, we didn't really talk too much about that. It's pretty simple principle. It's really OSB, oriented strand board or plywood on one side and on the other side, and then some type of foam in between. And there's different types of foams that are used. We use expanded polystyrene quite a bit, which is basically coffee cup material. And that foam is pretty stable and it offers some other good qualities. But a lot of times we're using the SIP panels on the roof, and we really like them on the roof because you can get them up quickly, you can get the building shedding water pretty quickly, and that's sort of important from a durability perspective. The less time your structure is exposed, the better. And so we really like those on the roof. On the walls, you know, we use them on the walls throughout the year for different projects, but we really like this wall system that we've been talking about for a number of reasons too.
Well, there's some higher insulation values that you can achieve with our matrix wall because of the combination of the Styco on the outside and whatever you choose on the inside. So in certain climates where you're looking for a higher rated R value, a higher rated enclosure, higher than what you typically get in a SIP, that's one of the big advantages to the matrix.
Yeah, although you can also get thicker amounts of insulation or rigid insulation on the SIP panel as well. So not to be totally confusing, typically we use SIPs for the roof and matrix wall for the sidewalls. We are happy to, and certain clients want us to, put SIPs for the sidewalls as well. Our first goal is to get an extraordinarily high performing envelope. There are a couple of different ways to do that. And our standard or our typical way is matrix walls on the sidewalls so that people have access to the stud walls for the mechanicals while installing them, as well as we like the performance of those walls. And then SIPs on the roof. And SIPs on the roof allow us short span structure. So in between, in fact, you can see up here, in between my rafters in my own home, there's 4 feet. And so, that structural insulated panel, that SIP is easily able to span that. And we also use it for some of our overhangs because pop goes the big old square, rectangle up on there, and we can just extend it out a certain distance for overhangs. So, we tend to use those SIPs for the roof. One more reason why is on the sidewalls, there's all sorts of cutouts and triangles, and the loss ratio or inefficiency of using the SIP on the sidewall sometimes is not to our client's benefit. But on the roof, it's typically much more bigger spans, bigger sections. We can bring in an 8x24 with very little waste. And so the efficiency, the economy is better on the roof than it is on the sidewall. So SIPs on the roof, matrix wall on the sidewall is our standard MO, but we're flexible along those lines, and Ty usually has long conversations with his clients about what makes sense for you.
So this building science sounds a little geeky. It sounds a little daunting, and I would imagine that many of our clients might feel that way. How do they get educated about these products? Is that part of our sales process or the design work? Where does that begin?
At the beginning, and it never ends. One of the things you said is we've been doing this for 40 years. New energy work started 40 years. And by the way, I'm going to just never let you live that down, that you reminded me how long we've been doing it.
But gray hair,
like yesterday.
Yeah, Jonathan, gray hair rules. It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, wisdom and stuff. So there's a lot to know. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Ty and I live this. This is really, it emanates every part of us all the time. And so there's no real reason to think that a client will come in and suddenly know as much as we do. And that's our job, is to make sure we're steering, guiding, suggesting. But I will tell you one thing that is always shocking. Ty, even day before yesterday, shared a really cool story about one of his clients. We tend to work for a smart group, and they tend to really learn fast and start to challenge us. And we learn in a circular fashion from so many people who say, but what about this? Have you thought about it this way? Like, no, that's an interesting concept. So it really is never-ending learning process, but also in both directions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there are some things, because we live and breathe these things every day. It's kind of like a lot of things in life. We can take some of the guesswork out. Whenever you're learning about something, there's so much to know. And Jonathan often uses this analogy of picking up a rock. And when you do that, there's a whole other universe under that rock. And for some people, that can be a little overwhelming. The idea that there's so much to know and there's so much out there, and how can I possibly ever get my arms around it? Well, because we've been doing this a long time, in part, it's in part because of this, but because we love it so much, we kind of pre-filter and pre-understand for our clients what matters and what's important. And things like insulation levels, for example, someone might say, well, why would I use R40 and not R60 on my roof, or some numbers? Well, there's lots of reasons. And at some point, for example, with our values, there might be a diminishing return based on your climate, for example. But we know, because we've been doing this a long time, done some analysis, and know a few things, and are privileged to be part of a good community that loves this sort of building science, etc. We know that things like air tightness actually are super important, and it's something that people don't think about a lot. Think about R value. Well, an analogy I always use is we can have R 150 in your walls and roof, but if you leave the front door open, it doesn't really matter, right? So all the cracks and crevices in your house add up to a window being open, for example. So, well, what does that really mean? Well, it means we need to go after the air tightness of a home. Well, how do you do that? And so, as I mentioned before, we have people on staff that this is their life, to know the origami involved in making membranes come together and figuring out where the cracks and crevices are and understanding how you make a really tight and good enclosure, because that's really super important. And we've only kind of discovered that by doing some analysis and seeing how air tightness impacts the efficiency of a home relative to our values, that at some point, insulation is great, but it does have a diminishing return. So these are the types of things we study, we try to understand, we have experience, and we can help get to the bottom of it with you if you have good questions, and we can answer.
Yeah. It's so fascinating that you say that. Sometimes people think, oh, we're just going to over insulate a house, and for instance, in my house, I have an R35 roof. To be really honest with you, that's not a lot of R value. And I built it in 2009 and 10, and so maybe today I would add a little bit more. But I can tell you that Portland right now Portland, Oregon is where I live, and Ty lives outside of Rochester, New York, near our Farmington, New York office. And we're having a heat wave. It was 95 yesterday, or 94 yesterday, or something like that. It's 64 in my house right now. I don't have any insulation. It's nuts. I got up this morning and put on a sweater because of all the things we do to make sure that we're using the dollars that are available to do the envelope right. And of course, there's some human interaction there. At night, we open the windows. In the morning, we close them. All those good things that we do. But nonetheless, it's not how much insulation you use, it's how you use it. It's the air tightness is critical, as an example. How we balance windows and and light coming in, and all of that's critical. And that's why, frankly, I'm just going to say this really quickly. That's why we don't really have preset plans, because it's better for the client if we go ahead and figure out what their site is, what their view shed is, what they want to look at, where the wind and the sun is coming from, what their budget is, and of course what their desires and their tastes are. So, that's just a little bit of a side there, but I think that helps us to tune the home for the client, and it doesn't really cost more to do it that way.
Yeah. Couple things I want to say. I want one point of clarification. Jonathan does have insulation in his home. He doesn't have air conditioning. You said insulation, which I thought was sort of ironic and funny, but he has insulation. He doesn't have air conditioning.
Right. Air conditioning is what I don't have.
What's interesting what you say about the design, overall design, people go back to passive solar design, for example. There's well-documented methodologies for designing a home that's good in terms of passive solar performance. Well, that's just another way that to say that, gosh, a home and a home design is a whole bunch of different complex conversations and thoughts and analysis. And in really good design, all of these things come together. If the house is well oriented and windows are used in a proper manner and overhangs are expressed in the right way, it's not only functional in terms of its building performance, these things are beautiful too. So for us, it's exciting when you can start to have not only the aesthetic, for lack of a better word, features of a home, be expressed, but when they're expressed, and they're performing and they're doing something to help the house function and perform from a thermal perspective. I think good design comes together right there in many ways, and that's kind of fun for us too.
So Jonathan brought up an interesting point about the weather in Portland. We build all over the country. Projects are in every state and in some cases outside of the country. So how do we tailor that building science when we have such varieties of geography and varieties of weather?
We study, we study climate zones. Ty, for instance, does most of his work in climate zone 5 and 6. I do more of my work out on the West Coast in climate zone 4. So by understanding how those climate zones are related to both code, by the way, and finally codes are starting to make more sense, I'm so pleased to say, but also just, you know, return on investment to the client and the planet, we look at the climate zones, and that's really one of the big ones. Ty, I know you've got something to add there.
Yeah, I think, so there's a couple things. No matter where you are in the country, you're going to hear a little bit more about air tightness. No matter where you are in the country, air tightness is important. And a lot of people hear air tightness and they think, oh my goodness, I don't want my house too tight because, you know, mold and bad things can happen, right? That's always been the conventional wisdom. I live in an old farmhouse that we're in the process of making much better, but I can tell you the wind blowing through the house in those days was a good thing. Only from a moisture perspective, it was not a good thing. From a heating perspective, it's a really bad thing. So what are we to do? Well, if we're trying to make a home tighter to hold the heat or the cool in, we then have to manage moisture in the house. We have to manage airflow, and that can be done mechanically, and that's super important. But the point is, no matter where you are, air tightness is a good thing. It's really insulation values and other environmental considerations that kind of come into effect. And as Jonathan says, you know, climate zones sort of tell us what we need to aim at in terms of minimums for insulation, which are getting higher all the time, which is a good thing. But we're hopefully doing more than just the minimum. And one of the things that isn't well defined is this air tightness thing. And I can remember doing some analysis and adding R value in a model that we had, a computer model, adding R value to a roof and adding R value to the walls. And we would see effect in terms of how the house was performing theoretically in a model, right? And this is the only way you can test it. And then when you change the air tightness levels of a home, you quickly see a dramatic change, a reduction in the heat load of a house. And it was like this light bulb for me. It was like, bing, this is the thing we need to really attack. So we've spent the better part of the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years trying to get our homes not only tight, but in some cases, really, really tight. And code, for example, says that if you take all the air in your house and suck it out in 1 hour, all of the air in your house turns over or exchanges or changes 3 times in an hour for a code level home. So for us, our goal is that if passively all the air went out of your house in the course of an hour, it would only happen once. So the goal is that your house is about 3 times tighter than code at a minimum. That's a company sort of target. At a minimum, we want to be there. But if we can do better and we can do it wisely without, you know, overshooting or spending more money than we need to, being efficient and kind of bringing value to the process, then we're going to try to get lower than that. Because that is a really good way to impact not only your heating bills and the money you spend, but ultimately the amount of energy you burn, and that's important.
You know, Ty, you run a design build department, so you are actually your own laboratory all the time, which is so interesting. For most of the folks who might be listening to this, we won't be your general contractor. We can't stress enough the partnership and care that needs to be put into actually installation. You know, that's just the way it is. We can design, or we can build a timber frame, or we can pre-make your sidewalls. Actually, if we do the enclosure, then of course it's going to be tight. But even if we just supply you those materials, you need to understand that your contractor or you or whoever it is doing the work has to be just as caring as we are to get those high numbers. I just wanted to say that real quick, but it's doable. Yeah. Carpenters care more than we give them, you know, sometimes the public might give them credit for. Builders want to do a good job. They just need the tools, the knowledge, and the permission, I think, sometimes to do that good job. So I just maybe wanted to say that about partnershiping.
Yeah, and we've seen builders that we work with, because we work with lots of outside builders, predominantly outside builders. We've seen their response be really great. I think of projects in Vermont, for example, and working with great builders there. And, they're interested. And our guys are in the field and they understand, as they call it, the origami of putting the pieces together and the membrane tie-ins and tapes and all these other techniques. Our guys in the field can convey that, and they really want to. They want to talk to builders about, okay, these are the principles that we're trying to achieve. This is how we do it. And when the rubber meets the road, as a builder, as a tradesperson, this is how you get it done in terms of how things come together. And our guys love to talk to people about that. And we're more than happy throughout the process, whatever involvement we have, to kind of convey whatever we can and talk about the things that we know, so that the house can be a better house and ultimately can serve the planet better and serve our clients better. So we love that.
I know we laughed earlier, Ty and I, we could talk about this for 3 days. We only have, 45 minutes or an hour here. So I do want to comment. One of our good clients out this way, Julie, is asking an important question. Is the insulation rating and strength compromised if the electrician runs the wiring through the SIP? Frankly not. So in that case, wiring in a structural insulated panel is not a big deal. You've got usually you've got conduit or something. Maybe, for instance, it's a 1-inch conduit that wire runs through, and that's 1 inch out of 6 or 8 or whatever the thickness of your SIP is, or 10 or 12 if it's in the ceiling. And your percentage of loss is very low, not a big deal. Where we see a bigger emphasis is, for instance, if you're running a 4-inch vent pipe in a 6-inch SIP, that we're not for that. Plus, it also affects the structure, the shear of that SIP more. So anyway, I hope that answers the question. There are a bunch of other questions here. We should hit a few of them. Ty, do you, or Drake, what do you think?
Well, one of them is about, we've talked about tight construction and eliminating airflow and building a well-insulated building. How do we maintain good air quality inside if this building is so tight?
I'll start that one, Jonathan, if you want. So there's a device that's called a heat recovery ventilator or an energy recovery ventilator. They're subtly different. I don't think we need to get into the weeds on that, but principally what it does is it takes the bad, moist, stale air in your house, and it takes fresh air from the outside, and it brings them through a heat exchanger, and therefore it either preheats or pre-cools the air, fresh air coming in, and it exhausts the bad air out. And so many times these units are set up on a timer, for example, or they run at certain points during the day to turn the air over in the house actively. I mentioned before, your old farmhouse does it passively, just does it on its own. When you have a tight home, you actually gain an advantage. You can control not only the indoor air quality, but you can control what's happening with that air that's exhausted, and you can actually reclaim the energy from it. So you use one of these devices, and you can also tie it into bathrooms, with a little timer on the wall, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever. But that unit does the work for us.
For 20 years, we've been saying that even lesser quality homes than ours really should have one of these. There are a number of pollutants in the air. There's a number of moisture in the air, even in lesser quality homes. So this is just a device you should have anyway. It's actually not a big deal these days.
Right.
I think for us, that I know of, since 1998, we haven't had a house designed or built that hasn't had a air-to-air heat exchanger of some sort or another.
Yeah.
So it's just not a big deal. Another question that's been asked is, Carrie is asking, do we do additions? We've done a lot of additions. Depends on where you are, because we do have to do some as-built drawings. Another one that is, Karen's asking, are these air quality devices noisy? Not if they're designed well. That's a great question, by the way. In my own house, I had a whistling sound in my own house that was really annoying. And so, but there's a box, it's $220. It's called that you can put in the inline to actually completely eliminate the noise of air movements. I learned that the hard way about 10 years ago. That was kind of interesting. Karen, you're also asking, do you give tours of your workshops where your SIPs or matrix walls are made? Absolutely. The SIPs, no, because we don't make the SIPs ourselves. On the West Coast, we typically use a company out of South Dakota or one out of Washington. On the East Coast, the company in Michigan and another one in Vermont. So we can hook you up with the SIPs manufacturers that may or may not be the best choice for you. The matrix wall, you bet, all day long. And in fact, that's a perfect segue into our new investment. Ty, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we're in the planning stages of something pretty exciting. We're working with a company in the Netherlands that produces machines that helps in the prefabrication of wall, roof, and floor systems. So we have an existing space in our facility that we've been doing a bunch of planning in terms of how to lay things out, but we're going to purchase these machines, and we're already deep into the process, and we anticipate we would have had them already if not for certain pandemics. We would have had them already. But it's a really great opportunity for us to get better at what we've been doing for a long time, which is pre-panelizing wall systems, but also to take it further and do, as I mentioned, floor systems and roof systems, to be more accurate, to be more thoughtful, to even bring a higher level of pre-engineering and pre-design to a manufactured off-site construction process that we believe in so much. So yeah, pretty exciting stuff. We're looking forward to not only being able to service our current projects and clients, but also expand our capacity. Our goal is that we do projects, and someone had a question on here, would you do an envelope for someone that I think it said it's not a timber frame client? And the answer is yes, and we do that already. And it's been a slow progression in that direction, but as a company, we believe so much in high performance enclosures that we want to do this more. And these machines, this process will not only allow us to do more, but we'll be able to introduce more people into our employment sphere, so to speak. And we're excited about it.
We call this new effort HPEZ, making high performance envelopes easier. And that's really our goal, because I know a lot of people would like to do a higher performance envelope, but between knowledge or pressure or finances, they have a harder time stepping beyond your typical mediocre envelope that we see so often in new construction. So we're just going to try to make high performance envelopes easier. And so this equipment that Ty refers to is really semi-automated. It's still going to require thoughtful crafts people. It's still going to require good management, but it will help us to speed things along.
A lot of the buildings that you see on our websites are larger buildings.
Oh, we had a little glitch there.
We had a little glitch there. Sorry about that. A lot of the buildings that you see on our website are larger homes. They're often fancy buildings. Do these building methods apply not only to large homes, but to smaller homes, something of a more modest design?
They sure do. I think there's probably two questions in there. The systems that we like to use and we believe in, they apply to all of our projects. And sometimes there are variations on the themes, as we've mentioned before, sometimes more SIPs or less SIPs, or even our wall system, we have some variations on the wall system. But the other part of the question is about large homes. And sometimes I think people, they see our website and they say, gosh, these are really big houses that you're involved with. How do you feel about that from a sustainability perspective? And so a couple of things, and Jonathan, you can chime in here certainly too, but we think it's not our place to tell people how large or how small a home that they would like. And so we always encourage people to build a little bit smaller if they're willing, to build better. And building better means a lot of things, but enclosure is one of them. But at the end of the day, if someone's going to build a large home and they're going to do it anyways, and they'd like us to be part of it, we're going to bring certain things to the table that we just simply won't compromise on. And that's good enclosure is one of them. And so we've seen, and we'd like to think, and we know to a degree that if we hadn't been involved in certain projects, those projects, larger homes, they may have just used whatever enclosure, and we've seen it happen. You may have just used fiberglass and 2x4s, but we have a really great, really great clients, and most of them will listen to us and entertain what we're saying, and they'll come along for the ride. And so some of those larger homes end up with really great enclosures and performing at a much higher level that they would have otherwise performed at. And we feel good about that. Yeah, I don't know, Jonathan, what do you want to add to that?
I think you said it well. Our job is to build as good a home as our clients want. In our design process, we talk about taking the house inside of you out so that you can see what that looks like and interact with that. It's not our place to put that house inside of you. You've got the house that you want. But as you say, inspiring people to maybe build a little smaller but what is a little smaller? That's everything is relative. And we built an 1,100 square foot home year before last that we love just as much as a 6,000 square foot home that I just visited earlier this week. So, it's really just about doing the best job we can for that particular client on that particular site with that particular budget.
Right. There's a question on here that asks about sustainable pieces of a home beyond the enclosure. And I think it's a really great question. The enclosure, I kind of think about things in a few segments or buckets or whatever. We've been talking a lot about the construction system of the home, which the enclosure is part of, but there's also the mechanical systems. That's another piece, right? And so when in our general contracting projects, and even our projects where we're just involved in design, we have lots of conversations about heating and cooling and the different and various systems that can be used. Certainly, there are people that are even more well-versed than us in terms of the right mechanical system for the right application, and we can leverage, the relationships that we have. But we know quite a bit to have conversations about what might be the right systems for your home. And so mechanical ventilation, which we mentioned before, those are super important. But that's a whole nother conversation for maybe another time and a whole nother segment of the building process. That's equally as important, I think, for us.
Along with that, Ty, along with that goes the window plan, both where they're located and how they're built, what kind of windows there are. We're a Marvin dealer. Marvin's, one of the best names in the U.S. They have a variety of different levels of customization and perhaps quality. But, that's not the only window out there. There are others that are also good. And so we talk about windows a lot and doors a lot. And then there's also, what are the materials that we're using on the house? We want them to be long lasting, but we also want them to be as natural as possible. As we've talked about the carbon footprint a number of times. We try to use materials that didn't require a lot of shipping or manufacturing or glues when possible. We do all of these things when possible, as possible, in conjunction with our clients and our other partners on the project. But since we're focused on all of this stuff, and many of you know our other company is Pioneer Millworks, which is a wood company, reclaimed and sustainably harvested wood. We don't hide the fact that we're wood people because wood is a low carbon footprint, it's an environmentally sound and stunning material to work with. So, hey, it's just part of the love affair. And then we don't back away from wood as an example, as one of the main building components of most of our projects. We're probably not the best choice for a steel and concrete modern box. It might not be what we do best. But if you like wood, then that's the area that I think we're strong in. The next question is, how do we estimate an enclosure? Yeah, Ty, you just had a talk last week on costs and estimating and that sort of thing. How would you answer that?
Well, I would say that there's a bunch of facets to that question. For us, how do we do it? We understand the wall area, we understand the system, and we we piece together the pieces and parts of an estimate that give you a really comprehensive cost once we have a design. So really, we talked a lot last week about, boy, the way that you get good information is you start with good information. And so if we have something to work from, we have a good design that we can, or even preliminary design that we can respond to, our timber frame sales engineers also are responsible for doing enclosure estimating, and our construction folks are too. So we can take that design and then we can do some really good estimating that gets you a very good sense of cost. Before you have much tangible, it's, as we talked about last week, it's hard to do, and honestly, it's a little bit of a dart, and we don't think we do a great service to our clients if we don't give them good information to respond to. So I would say call us up, let's talk about what you're thinking, have some conversations, and then sort of take it from there.
Yeah, that's a delicate process, but one that I think is very valuable in the early stages. So as people understand what their dream is, what the costs are, how they're going to get built, who's going to build the structure itself, and how we partner with local builders. It's a complicated process. So you start with a phone call, and we dive into your project individually. It's just a smart way to approach it.
And I'm really sorry if we're dancing around the giving you a number, but we don't necessarily know what that number is just yet. Generally, we found that the matrix walls and the SIPs are about competitive with each other. Just generally give you some sense there. And watching last week's webinar would be helpful, I think, but I'm not sure we really have time to dig into exactly how to do estimating here. A lot of communication. Custom high-performing homes are more expensive than a track home. We know that. We're seeing 20 to 25% increase in costs over your basic home, given all the same interior components, because some of this stuff has nothing to do with your envelope. But we just don't really want to mislead you and pretend that we can look into my silver ball and tell you just what that's going to cost before we actually talk more about it.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
What I want to make is that we have focused a little bit on cost, and obviously that's a key factor, but I also think of this as an investment. If somebody's going to enjoy this home and live in it for a long time, pass it on to future generations, it's an investment. No different than a good piece of art or many other things that we value, hold close to our heart, understand the benefits, and spend the money because it's worth it. That to me is more important than just the cost. We can always find things cheaper. And
it goes along with the design process. Understanding what your budget is at the beginning helps us to best tailor the house to it as well as we go. Sometimes I say that we're walking spreadsheets, and that's giving us too much credit, but we do think about these things on a regular basis. There's a fascinating question here. It's what type of windows have you installed higher than 9,400 feet? For one thing, I'm going to get a nosebleed just thinking about it. But we have worked way up on a lot of mountains. In that example, we rely on our window suppliers to discuss. I know that Marvin's got lots of experience in the very high mountains. Alpine Glass is one that's pretty good. Cascadia, is another one that's really experienced in mountains. We don't pretend that we are experts on how to engineer and build a window at 9,400 feet, but I will tell you that I don't want to be installing that window in January. So, but you already know that. I don't know who's asking this question, but totally amazing.
Yeah, I think we need to have some conversations with the window manufacturer, as you say.
Like we're designing a project right now in the Bahamas, and anybody who's followed that knows that the place was pretty much leveled 18 months ago, and it was just disastrous. So winds gusts up to 280 miles an hour. I was there. It was just shocking, breathtaking, sad. And, you know, we're looking at every window installation details, but also the type of glass, impact resistance and not, you know, so it becomes an important part of a conversation. By the way, that's only an 1,100 square foot house, you know, so we do big, we do little. And whoever's asking about, should I know this stuff about stick-built houses? Yes. You know, one of my pet peeves is that people tend to know more about their car than they know about their house construction. You know, they know more about their engines and their displacement and their number of cylinders and than how to build their houses. We've seen a big sea change in that in the last number of years. A level of involvement and smarts in our clients has gone up and up as we have as this information has become more and more important. But yeah, you need to know a lot about how to build a house. That's for sure. And make sure your builder does. And make sure you find somebody who really is geeking out over it, in my opinion, when it comes to your designer. I know we're running out of time. I do want to say that we're not only your designer. We're, you know, about a significant percentage of our work, we work with repeat and architects, engineers, and builders around the country, or we can also be your designer architect if you'd like. We have registered architects like Ty on the East Coast, my coworker David on the West Coast. And so I'm just giving you that information if you're new to our organization.
We have a lot of features and a lot of benefits to work in our company, a lot of talent. And it has served us well, both offices, both Portland and then Farmington, function in a similar fashion and work together to give you a great quality house.
Hey, Drake, thanks for your time. This is a 6 out of 6 in the series. It came out of this whole COVID issue where, you know, how do we reach out? We don't have the home shows we used to have. I myself give tours routinely in my home, but now haven't in 3 or 4 months. And it's been a different and fascinating, challenging, sometimes difficult time for a lot of companies, but we're blessed with a healthy amount of work, and this was a fun little experience doing these 6 seminars with you. We're going to regroup, talk about whether we want to do any more after this. Ty mentioned MEPs, mechanical, electrical, plumbing as a really interesting area. There's a number of different areas of further discussions we can get into in design. I was talking about doing a tour of the Vermont Street project, which is my house 10 years in. It was originally Fine Home Buildings House of the Year Award in 2010. I'm sort of interested in what's it been like for 10 years, doing that retrospective, you know, the 10 years later kind of thing. I feel like it's an album cover, you know, 10 years later. But sure enough, we're here, and thanks, Drake, and thanks for playing that mandolin, dude.
Yeah, well, that was fun. Yeah. Well, I want to thank both of you for participating today. I think this was a fascinating topic. It applies to a lot of applications, a lot of projects. It gives our clients the right kind of envelope to live in and enjoy for a long time. We hope that these conversations have inspired you. We've given you some valuable information. You've gotten excited about your future project. We encourage you to give us a call. We want to stay in touch, and we wish you the very best. Be well, stay safe, enjoy the rest of your summer, and let's talk about your project pretty soon. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Bye-bye.